Okay, so this is Karen again. Thanks for your patience. I think we have all things in order now. We are now recording the webinar for those of our new directors and contractors who are on spring break this week. And we're sad they were going to be missing the webinar. They're going to be able to view this at a later time. So like I said, I'm Karen Gans. I'm the Training and Technical Assistance Manager with the ECEAP program. Also in the room with me, I have Senya Cooper, who is the person who will often be answering your emails when you send emails to the ECEAP inbox. I also have pre-K specialist Peggy Brown and Leah Capili in the room with me. I have our new ECEAP administrator, Kelly Bohannon, with us, and then I also have Joyce Kilmer, our, Joyce, what is your title?
I am the ECEAP data analyst.
Our ECEAP data analyst, who's going to be talking with us about ELMS today. I know you and I both say it differently.
I say it both ways.
You say data, I say data. So just like in the earlier webinars, we've asked some experienced directors to join us on this webinar as well, and I'm happy to say that today we have Carrie Kaufman joining us from Walla Walla Public Schools and Connie Mueller from Kitsap Community Resources. Thank you to both of you for joining us on the call. When we, since you haven't presented on these webinars in the past, the way that it works is that when there'll be sections where I'll really pretty much just turn it over to you and ask you to share what you're doing in your program. And then the other thing that I'll just say, as always, if you have questions, you can go ahead and type your questions in the question box, and we have Senya who's going to be managing those and getting those to us so that we can try and answer them during the webinar as well. So if you ever have problems hearing something, or if one of the things that we present brings up more questions for you, don't hesitate to type a question into the question box and we'll answer them as we're able. Okay, so Senya, can you forward the, or Joyce, forward arrow? I think you should do that. Great, okay. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to be, like I said, Joyce is going to be talking with us about ELMS tips. We're going to be talking a little bit about some ways to prepare for the new year in ECEAP. Yes, right now you would be preparing for your new year in ECEAP. We're going to be talking about the financial disclosure, just some tips to give you about completing the financial disclosure because it is due soon, and we want you to have some information around that. And then we're also going to be talking about self-assessment as well and answering any questions that come up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joyce.
Great. So we're going to talk this morning about starting the brand new school year, next school year, in ELMS. I want to make sure you know where the new paper downloadable applications are, child applications for the new school year, and then talk about some other ELMS resources. And I'm going to be switching back and forth between demonstrating on live ELMS, showing you where documents are on the web page, and these slides. So please just have a little patience with my fumbling between those different systems. So first of all, ELMS is now ready for the 16-17 school year. That means you can set up your sites and classes in ELMS now. You can start pre-screening children that you are thinking you may enroll in the next school year and put their pre-screens and child applications in ELMS now for next year. And I also want to we have a feedback loop with somebody's computer. Can you please make sure that your computer microphones are off and that you are on this call using the phone number that appears on the webinar screen. So that weird sound we were seeing was the feedback, hearing the feedback loop of a computer microphone. Sounds like we're clear now, and whoever knew about it, fix it quickly for us. Okay, so one more thing to know about the new school year in ELMS is any 3-year-olds that you had entered in ELMS in the 2015-16 school year have automatically all rolled over to the new school year. So their pre-screen or application or waiting list status or any situation you had them in the old school year has rolled over to the new school year. If they're currently enrolled in this school year, April 4th today, then they'll show up on the waiting list for that site in the new school year, so you can re-enroll them if that's what you choose to do. So I'm going to just talk about a few of the changes that happen at this time of year. So I'm going to go to our website, and okay, so this is the ELMS publications page. I'm sure that you've all been there for various things this school year, but anyone here at the Department of Early Learning can tell you how to get to this page if you need that kind of assistance. If you scroll down the page, you're going to see a section that says ELMS here. And what I want to point out for you is the brand new revision of the document starting the new school year in ELMS. So this is a handy 3-page guide to getting your sites and classes set up and doing everything in ELMS that you need to do to start off the year. I'm not going to walk us through because I think these 3 pages will walk you through the process on the day that you're ready to do it. Okay, and then I'm going to pop into ELMS. I'm using a test version of ELMS. Let's see. I think I need a little bit of help. There. Okay, got it. I'm using a test version of ELMS here, so you will not see any real child data at all while I'm demonstrating. I want to show you how up in the upper right corner, there's a large peach-colored box where you select the school year. And what you'll always want to do, if you're working in the new school year, you'll want to change it to 2016-17. And then if you are putting in data for the current school year, you need to make sure to change it back there. Now through June 30th, when you open ELMS, it'll always open to 2015-16. Starting July 1st, it'll always open to 16-17. But you have the ability to manually switch between the 2 years. And I know that's a little tricky for data entry people at this time of year, just remembering to be in the right year before you start entering data. Okay, so we've started a child here I started a pretend child. Her name is Joyce Example. And I want to show you a few of the new things this year in ELMS here. So I'm going to, if you were going to the first page of the pre-screen or the first page of the application, we've got some questions that are behaving a little bit differently than they did last year. The first one is this child in foster care? So if you click yes for that question, you're going to get a pop-up box that clarifies what is meant by foster care. And so this question, you should only say yes if it's a foster care home licensed by the state. So it's never going to be foster care if the child's with their biological parents or if they're in an informal kind of placement. So this question itself is just about licensed foster care. So you've got that pop-up box now, and you'll have to say, okay, licensed foster care. And this will just make our data and the ELMS process so much smoother for the year. It will, when you've chosen foster care, ELMS takes you down a certain path. And we want to make sure you belong on that path from the beginning. Okay, another question that is worded totally differently this year is the last one on this list here. Is this child living with a guardian who is not a parent, not a licensed foster parent, and is receiving a TANF grant on behalf of the child? So that's a long-winded way to get to the kind of kinship care that involves a child-only TANF grant, a non-needy relative TANF grant, certain kinds of grants. And again, that takes you down a certain path in ELM, so we want to make sure that you that our questions lead you correctly to that path. If you say yes, you're also going to get a pop-up with more information. You can really check the definition, say okay if you need to, if it's the right definition, or cancel if it's not. So those questions are worded differently. They'll make ELMS much more accurate, both for you and for us when we're compiling state data this year. Another thing that's brand new is the Early Start Act that passed in 2015 required the Department of Early Learning to start collecting much more detailed information about child ethnicity and race. So now if you click yes for the child's origin, and I'm going to have to switch to the application because I have a completed and locked pre-screen. I can't demonstrate that here. So give me just a second to switch to another place where this is. Let's see. Very creatively named children. Okay. So all those questions that are on the pre-screen are also on the application, because we know that sometimes children change situations between the day a pre-screen's done and the day an application's done. So you can see I've got the same question here about ethnicity. Is this child of Hispanic or Latino origin? I want to point out a tip for ELMS that's always available to you. When you see these faint dotted lines under a phrase, if you highlight over them, they turn pink. If you click, you get the definition. So throughout ELMS, if you can see those faint dotted lines, you can get much more information. You'll see it's here under family assessment response. It's here under homeless. Just highlight, click, and you've got more information. So there is a definition of Hispanic and Latino you can check. If I click yes, ELMS is going to, let's see, do I have to save the page first? ELMS is not behaving as expected right this minute. You should immediately see a drop-down box that asks you for a detailed choice about Hispanic or Latino, where you would pick that they are Mexican, they're Colombian. There's quite a long list. You can pick more than one. I'll make sure this gets fixed. It may just be a problem in the test environment I'm showing you. Real ELMS may be correct. But could you make me just a scribble note to check on that, please? Same thing happens when you choose a race. You can always choose more than one race. So I'm going to say American Indian and white for this child here. If you select that a child is white, that they're Black or African American, there's no subcategories according to the federal government under those more global race categories. If you select American Indian or Alaska Native, if you select Asian or Pacific Islander, then ELMS is going to have you pick the subcategories only. Now, I suspect it's going to happen to me right now when I try to say next. No, it didn't happen. You're just going to have to trust me that there's a box that comes that's going to appear that has the subcategory selection. If I go to the ELMS Administrator's Manual, so I'm back on the ECEAP Publications page. If I go to the ELMS Eligibility Enrollment Manual and open that up, which takes 17 more seconds, the very last page of this manual is actually going to have all those subcategories for you in an appendix, so you can, post that page somewhere where you can access it easily. Okay, eligibility enrollment manual. I've got to get. Sonia, can you help me for a second with if that's my button to? Yeah. Okay. get so I can scroll. Okay. Very end of it, you can see the subcategories that I'm speaking about. So we have these subcategories for Hispanic Latino. If none of the first ones match, sometimes Latin American may match, sometimes other Hispanic or Latino may be your best option. As usual, anytime you click an other in ELMS, you'll be required to enter what that other is. There's Asian categories, American Indian, and Native, Alaska Native, and then Native Hawaiian of the Pacific Islander as well. That's a new thing this coming school year in ELMS. One of the reasons that that's was in the Early Start Act is so that we can do much more accurate research. It comes up in discussions particularly around the Asian category, that's too large of a global category where, for example, Chinese families that have been here for 5 generations are not showing as much of an achievement gap or opportunity gap as really brand new immigrant families from some Southeast Asian countries. And we want to not, just kind of wash out the data. We want to be able to be more accurate and helpful. Okay, back to the PowerPoint for a second here. I'm going to show you where our new paper applications are posted. So back to the ELMS publications page, scrolling down to where it says enrollment, and we have the downloadable applications in both English and Spanish. We have instructions here. This is just a one-page quick thing that gives you a rundown of how you could use these applications. Now, using paper applications is optional. You could decide, and ELMS was built so that you could just sit with a family and type information directly into ELMS. ELMS is also built so that you can have a pre-screen process, which we understand some of our larger ECEAP contractors have, and then decide from the pre-screen results to go on and do an application just for some of the children. Or you can do a pre-screen and application all in one lump. So we put our forms together so there is a separate pre-screen form and a separate application form, or a combined one that you can do all as one. You'll see that they're much longer now, and that's because of the addition of all the ethnicity and race categories. But what you can trust about these downloadable applications is that they will collect all the information that's needed for ELMS. We publish them here for you in Word format so that you can also add additional questions that you're trying to collect data on, for example, or additional information you want. But everything you need for ELMS is in these forms, and if you ever find that it's not, please email us and tell us. Okay. I did that. We have a separate verifications worksheet here. In the past, that was combined. It was also attached to the combined pre-screening application, but I tell you, it just got too long with the new categories. So if you'd like a paper version of a way to record which documents you're checking with a family to confirm the child's age, the guardian's authority to enroll, the family size, even the immunization status, you can print out copies of this 2-page document. Oh, and it goes into income as well. So anything you need to verify for ECEAP eligibility, there's a 2-page form here available for you to use if you choose to. Okay, then just making sure that you see the other ELMS documents that are here available on the ECEAP webpage, the Administrator's Manual, ELMS data entry minimum requirements. Again, that's maybe a 4-page document that says, here's what you have to do in ELMS and when. It's a bit overwhelming to look at once, but it's we wanted to put a package together that said, here's all the requirements. So please check it like once a year or so that you've got someone covering each of these requirements. We have 2 documents that are always up to date, or up to date monthly. Any ELMS known issues, if there's something we know that's broke, you're welcome to check there to see if there's already instructions about it. And then ELMS tips, just over time, little tricks we've learned about ELMS. The 2 manuals, the admin manual and the ELMS eligibility enrollment manual, are also updated monthly with any changes in ELMS or any clarifications that you've let us know were needed. Okay, that is that slide. I'm going back to the slide 2 here. Okay. Okay, we're going to talk some about verifying eligibility documents and using ELMS to do that. We're going to talk about the 2-step process for enrolling a child in ECEAP, where you determine if they're eligible and then you prioritize them for the available slots. And then talk about how you get help when you have questions about any of this here. So verifying is a legal requirement for us. It's making sure that you have actually looked at documents that prove that a child is eligible, and that serves as backup that we can say ECEAP state dollars were used exactly how the legislature intended them to be used. So it's a very legalistic kind of requirement as well. I'm going to go into ELMS again for this. And we were on the first step of the child application, and I clicked next, and that got us to a brand new page in ELMS called verifications. Until last Thursday, the child info page in ELMS and the verifications page were merged. It was all one. It was a very cluttered page to look at. And because verifications are so important, we really wanted to call this out as a separate page. We've got instructions at the top that are worth reading occasionally. Let's see. I'm actually going to walk us through it here because we think this is such important information here. Be sure to ask the parents for backup documents. You can see the list of suggested documents on the DEL website that I just showed you. There's also, when you're on the last page of the pre-screen in ELMS, there's a link to the list that you can just click on that link and email it to a parent, print it out for a parent, the kinds of documents that they would need to bring in. As you're verifying any of these categories here, please don't select other if the choice you need is already on the list. I sound a little sarcastic when I say that, and that's not, I don't intend that tone, but if it says, you know, court documents on the list, and you click other and put in the name of a specific court document, that's unnecessary. It makes it harder to manage the data. So if it's a child custody order, you can just click court documents for that example. So check out what's on the drop-down list. We did alter those a little bit. We read through what people selected for the whole year this last year, and we've altered them so we think we have the right choices for you. So there are we had a few suggestions of choices, so you'll now see like the IRS transcripts are there for an income choice and that sort of thing. So we will take suggestions also for our annual updates. Okay, we also ask that if you don't select other and enter application for the reasons or the example of other, because what we are doing is verifying the application. Okay.
So just to clarify, the
Please.
application then can't be the evidence that staff collect to show that the family is eligible.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Just really want to be clear about that.
Yeah, there's almost always another document you're going to need to look at. But let's look at the last 2 bullets for the exceptions to that. Mm-hmm. So when a family is homeless, and doesn't have their verification documents, they had to move quickly or something, and they just don't have the birth certificates anymore, they don't have their last year's income tax, all that sort of thing. In that situation, we follow the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Act requirements, and that means you have up to 90 days to collect those documents. So we would suggest that you're working with the family right from the beginning, that you find out the documents are unavailable, and help them order new birth certificates, help them order their IRS transcripts, whatever is needed to be documented. And then, because if you're enrolling them right away, you won't be able to put the changes into the application yourself. It'll be locked once the child's enrolled. But here you can email elms@del.wa.gov and let us know which documents to enter in here for you. We ask that you do that to this email and by email, because then we have the backup documents that we weren't just messing with the child's application without your permission. Not that we have, not that that would entertain us ever. Okay, and in very rare situations, there just may not be a document available. In that case, that's when you use other, and you can enter parent report as the other reason. That shouldn't be a standard process that happens for all families. That's a very rare situation. Most of the time we need to help families locate documents. Okay, so you'll see the very first thing on this page is that a name of a staff person needs to be entered. That is the person who is verifying the documents, seeing them with their own eyes. So it's not the name of the person doing the data entry necessarily. It needs to be who saw the documents. And I'm going to say something a little scary, that this is the person who gets called to the witness stand if there's a fraud investigation about this family shouldn't have been eligible for ECEAP, something like that. So it's very important to have the right person's name who's taking responsibility for having eyeballed the documents. Okay. We put in the date that the parent signed the application. So again, that's not the data entry date, it's the date the parent signed it. That's the date that starts the clock for, or actually it's a dividing line for some of your statistics. If the family has a well-child exam for that child before the date the parent signed the application, we assume they did that on their own. If the well-child exam comes in after the date of the application, we assume there was some ECEAP influence, and we take credit for that well-child exam happening as a result of the talk at the time of application. Okay, so that date, and then you're recording which documents you saw for the child's age, for verifying the birth date. There's a list of documents ending with an other that's rarely used. There's a list of documents for verifying that this adult has authority to enroll the child. And I'll say we are currently doing some research on the real unusual situations here, and we will be, presenting guidance later on when you just can't tell who the legal guardian is and do we have the legal authority documented. We will be getting more information on that soon. And then for family size, the most frequent ways that this is proved is by a benefits letter or a tax record. Okay, so that's our new verifications format. Back to the slide here. Okay. So the issue about eligibility then prioritization is really explained in the ECEAP performance standards, where we have certain criteria for which children are eligible for ECEAP slots, but we don't have that many ECEAP slots statewide for all children. We're about 7,000 slots short for the children who would be eligible. So, DEL's expectation is that you do a lot of applications for children. You've recruited the families, you've done as many applications as you can, and then you can look in ELMS on any of the waiting list locations and see the children's priority points. So children who are in foster care, in the child welfare system in any way, who are very low income and 4 years old are going to show up with 100 points. Children who were enrolled last year are going to show up with 100 points. So we'd expect all those 100 pointers to get in. We'd expect the 95 pointers, the 90 pointers to get in. When it starts getting lower, you'd be really wanting to look very carefully and making sure that you're both finding the most eligible children in your community, talking with your pre-K specialists about it if that's being difficult to do, and but definitely getting the highest priority children into the slots. Anything you want to add on that topic? Okay. Good. We have the mandate of making sure that the children who most need ECEAP services are the ones who get into it.
So I guess I will add, now that you said that, I will add that that's one of the main things that the pre-K specialists are looking for when they come out and complete site monitoring visits and they do an eligibility and enrollment. They'll usually look at 3 to 5 different files to be able to double check and make sure that what you have in your files on site matches what's in ELMS, and that you really have the you either have the documentation or you've noted specifically the documentation, and that it all matches up, and that really and truly the most eligible children have been served.
Mm-hmm. And we do a layer of that sitting here in the ECEAP data team as well, where we look at your entire spread of priority points for your enrolled children over the year, and compare it across the state. Are more children with 60 points getting in this county, and only children with 100 points can get in this county? So we'd be using that for longer range decisions about where our ECEAP slots go. Okay, in a minute I'm going to come back to that just so I can show you a few documents that could be useful. But I want to end this slide by saying anytime you need help, if it's about ELMS and data entry in ELMS, or ELMS looks broken, or you just need to know how to make it work for you, there's an easy to remember email address, elms@del.wa.gov. That's the fastest way to get help with ELMS. There's 4 of us looking at that email box. There's always somebody who is on it. You usually get your responses within a few minutes. Every now and then we're testing a new release of ELMS, and you might have to wait a few hours, but it's never longer than that. You're getting your ELMS help right away. If it's about a policy clarification about eligibility or prioritization or any of that, you'll want to contact your DEL pre-K specialist. And you can look forward to some training, probably both on the eligibility and the ELMS pieces coming up later this year.
And this is Karen, and I'll just add that when the kinds of things that you would be contacting your pre-K specialist for, when Joyce is talking about the policy pieces, she's really talking about the tricky enrollments, the ones where you have a family and they're sitting in front of you and you're like, well, I think they're probably eligible, and I think that they're eligible because of this and this. And then, but you're not quite sure because it's just enough off that it doesn't quite fit in the categories for you that you're used to. Please contact the pre-K specialists that you work with. They get those calls all the time and help program staff problem solve around those kinds of questions that come up for people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm back on the ECEAP publications page. In the enrollment section, I want to show you the second to the last document, our priority point chart. So this chart is rather overwhelming to glance at, but it shows how the priority point system is built into ELMS. Okay, so like I said before, in the first section, if a child is in foster care, they get 100 points, whether they're 3 years old or 4 years old. If the family is receiving child protective services or family assessment response services, regardless of the child's age, that child's 100 points. That's our they're in. As soon as there's a slot available, we want them in. For every other child, they're getting 35 points if they're 4 years old, and no additional points for age if they're 3 years old. And that's because when we start having to sort for a limited number of slots, we want to make sure that children get at least 1 year of ECEAP. Okay, and then this next category, where it says income, returning, and homeless. If they're returning, they get 65 points plus their 35 4-year-old points, so that's 100 points for returning children from the previous year. If they're homeless, they're getting 65 points. If they're at the very lowest income categories, they're getting 65 points, and then you'll see how the points gradually drop down for other income categories. Okay, so they're getting awarded points by income, and then we have a final section that's called our research-based risk factors. And by that we mean these are risk factors that we were able to find research that said this factor impacted a child's performance or experience in their school years later on. So, and those were given points accordingly. They also, ELMS knows about these points and will add them. ELMS doesn't know about any other risk factors that you might think about and use in your program. We, at the time that we looked for this research, we took in input from all ECEAP contractors about what risk factors they were using, and we kept all the ones that we could tie to school performance. And we're probably due for a 5-year evaluation of that again, and you'll probably hear that we're looking at it sometime within the next year or so again. So there's set risk factors that ELMS knows about and is counting for this process. Okay, and then I'm just going to quickly go back into ELMS and show you where the waiting list is. So it's on the Child tab. You use this little link that says waiting list on the peach-colored bar. My ELMS is thinking about getting there. And then your contractor will already be pre-selected. You'll be able to choose a subcontractor and a site. And then when you click search, all the children who are on the waiting list for that site come up, and you can see their points. You can see if they're on an IEP. You can see if they're over income. I'm not going to click it right now because there are real children listed here. But we want you to load your waiting list and then look at prioritization. I think that's my whole story for today. Okay.
Thank you, Joyce.
So I will step down those parts.
Very much. I'll just say that one of the things I really appreciate about ELMS is how much ELMS has changed and developed over the years, and how I really see it as a responsive system. That so Joyce is not joking when she says we really want your feedback around how you think ELMS could be better, or when you think something is in ELMS that is confusing. They have honestly taken that feedback in the past, and they have made updates to ELMS and changed it over time. And you get really, it's very nice, you get the first peek at the most recent updates that have been made in ELMS, and you get to be able to be really the first ones who get to see, think about what you can do to help your staff in planning to be able to make sure that all of these fields get entered completely when you're enrolling families for next year. It looks like we have a couple of questions.
We can take the first one.
And I think, yeah, go ahead, Joyce.
So Esna, you've asked about 3-year-olds rolling over in ELMS and not needing another application. So they're maybe, maybe not. If the child was enrolled in this current school year, in the 15-16 application, or school year, they will not need a new application. Once a child's been enrolled, their ECEAP application is locked and is never redone. If the child was in any other status and is not currently enrolled in ECEAP, their application is going to roll over and pre-fill many of the fields in the application for you for ease, but you do have to redo the fields that are attached to eligibility because the child's never been enrolled, so we don't want an application that could possibly be up to 1.5 years old at that point. Okay, is there a 4-page, at this site there's a 4-page health history attached to the application. Is this required, recommended by DEL? Edna, I need more information. I'm not recognizing what you're meaning by the 4-page health history.
I think what we can say, though, is that that you could go to that document. Actually, Joyce, can we or Senya, can we toggle over there to the ECEAP verification page?
4-page health history attached to the application.
And what we can do is we can look at that document that Joyce referenced that talks about what the requirements are for you to put into ELMS, and then you will know.
Okay. Okay, I am understanding now, Ethna. So it sounds like San Juan County has its own 4-page health history, and we'll need the information. You may have more or less than we need for ELMS. So we're going to take you to a child application in ELMS and show you exactly what we're needing. Okay. You want to go down to enrollment, and how about click on the child application?
How about you have the document that has
this one's not in the verification piece, so let's click open. Sorry, it took me a while to recognize the question, Yesna. So if we're in the application and we go to the part 8 of this version that says health information, this is the part that we need at enrollment. You may be collecting more information at that time and starting to do some of your health coordination services work. So that might be a plan, but this is all we need before the point of application. Okay?
Thanks, Joy.
You bet. Any other questions?
It looks like not.
I'm just open for you in case you.
Yeah, we'll probably go back to the page. Yeah.
Okay. So it's just going to sit here under the Internet Explorer.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thanks again, Joy, for giving us the latest update and helping new contractors and directors start to really be thinking about next year and enrollment for next year and what they're going to need to be thinking about with their staff or just for themselves for enrolling children in ELMS next year. All right. So now I'm going to move on. Except I can't. Senya, can you move the page for me? Thank you. So this is sort of loosely tied.
I'm going to stay for this.
Okay, so this is loosely tied to some of what Joyce was talking about with ELMS. It has to do, we've heard from a number of different ECEAP directors that are newer to this process, that they have a really hard time with getting all of the documentation that they need from families. And so we wanted to make sure that we had some time to be able to talk about this with our more experienced and seasoned directors. So Senya's going to go ahead and unmute Connie and Carrie right now. And it really is important to have that documentation, obviously, as Joyce has just shown us why it's so important. And so we wanted to ask you what you set up to be able to make sure that you are getting documentation from the parents and how you're doing that. So it looks like you need to enter the audio pin. So Carrie, it looks like you need to enter the audio pin in order for us to be able to unmute you. So if you can do that, that would be great. And then what we'll do is we will talk with Connie. Connie, hello?
Yes. Hello.
Hi, Connie. Oh, it's so great that you were there. Yay!
Well, Peggy Brown was a big help to me to get in here today.
Okay, good. So, Connie, what tips and tricks have you and your team developed in order to be able to get the documentation? Because we know it can really be a challenge.
Right. We've really struggled with this over the last year, and we still continue to refine it. But I think we've come up with a system that at least gives the parents every opportunity to try and get their documentation to us. And I have with me Joyce Chenard, who is my enrollment coordinator. And if you don't mind, I'm going to let her tell you our process.
That is fantastic.
Hello. So one of the things that we do is when we first meet with a parent with a process of enrollment, we meet with them and we discuss the selection criteria. You know, and we go over numerous points and advantages of being enrolled in our ECEAP program. We also send them home with. Yes.
Joyce, can I interrupt you? Can you sit a little bit closer to the phone? It's just a little bit hard to hear you on the speakerphone.
Volume button up. There, we turned our volume button up. It might have been too low.
Is that better?
This is better, yes. Thank you.
Okay. So, again, one thing that we do when we first meet with the parent, we discuss, you know, pointers of the benefits of being enrolled in our ECAP program. We never send a parent home without documentation of what they would need in order to complete the application process, which is a postcard of listing of verifying documents that we can use to determine, you know, eligibility. We've also created documents like third-party release of information, and I myself and a few others that help with the enrollment process have went out and recruited a one-on-one person that we can speak with at DSHS, at the unemployment office, as well as the Social Security and Income and Administration office. So we you know, really try to help our parents. If we need to go pick them up and take them to the designated places to get that information, we'll do that as well.
Also, with this list of the needed documents, we send out reminders. So maybe we'll have immunization, but we won't have the income. So we sent them a reminder of what they might need to get into us, because sometimes, you know, they get busy, they forget. So we don't hound them, but we do try with every opportunity to help them understand what's needed and how they can get that to us.
That's great. That's great. So, I mean, I guess part of what I would say that you've shared is that you make sure that you have developed relationships with key partner agencies in your community, and that you have contact people there that you can connect families with and that your staff can connect with as well to help be able to get the documentation that you need.
Exactly.
Correct.
And then it also, oh, go ahead.
And then making sure that we don't cross any privacy barriers. We also make sure that when we go and reach out to these community partners, that we have a release of information at hand with us.
Okay, that's great. So you make sure that you have a release of information so that you're protecting family confidentiality, and then and then the other thing that I heard you say is that you send them away after their first visit with you with a list of the documentations that they're going to need to be able to bring back in order to have their child be enrolled in the program.
Correct.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thanks so much for sharing that. Are we still struggling with Carrie's sound? Oh, bummer. I'm sorry, Carrie. That's always really hard when that happens. Svendy, do we have any no questions that have come up as a result of this? Okay. So, Carrie, you can also type in the chat box any additional information that you would want to add, and I can just report that out for folks if we're not able to get your audio up and going. Okay, so
coming back.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on while other people on the team try and support Carrie in having her audio work. So the next item, the next slide talks about, I guess before I go to this slide, I just want to say that the programs, I mean, I think that we have heard that have the hardest trouble, those are the programs that enroll before they have all the documentation. Because if that happens, then it's much harder to use the parent's motivation to have their child be enrolled in the program. And so we know that there's an exception for that with homeless families, and that's stated in the performance standards. And with other groups, contractors have just really struggled, and families, I think, feel confused. They don't understand why they need to bring it in if their child is already attending in class. So that would be one of the tips that I've learned over the years from different contractors in their struggle to get the needed documentation. Carrie, hello? Can you hear me now? Yes, yay! So sorry. That's okay, that's all right. So now we have Carrie Kaufman on the phone from Walla Walla School District. Carrie, is there anything that you would want to add around the topic of getting documentation from families?
Yeah, we actually in our application packet, we have a checklist on the front that has a list of things that we need from families. So we really encourage them to have all of that when they come to us. If they don't, then we go through, looking at McKinney-Vento or any of the other barriers that they may have, and then putting in that support of how to receive that information or how to get that information. So the checklist, I think, really helps just because then people know from the get-go what we need.
Okay. So have you created your own internal checklist then?
Yes.
Yes.
Because remember, we are blended, so we've got to meet both Head Start and ECEAP standards. So our application is a blended application, and so we've got all of that on there.
So you just blended it between your two funding streams?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then same thing with the relationship with our different agencies in town. And we've been using social media a lot.
Have you? How have you been using social media?
There's some websites, or there's some Facebook pages in Walla Walla. There's a virtual yard sale Facebook page and things for sale or free in Walla Walla. And so we'll jump on there and put that we're accepting applications. And that's almost a better avenue for us right now than posting flyers around town.
Huh. Wow.
Now,
so
because
really,
then people tag their friends and they tag other friends and they come in.
That is a great tip. That actually is not a tip that I've heard of yet, so that's a really great tip for people.
It was discovered out of desperation.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a good way to know that you're doing everything you can to find the most eligible children in your community.
Yeah, and we find a lot of our families are on those websites because, it's a yard sale, it's free items, then there's an eyewitness news site for here in Walla Walla, so we put it on there a lot too. And
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing. So I'm going to just we have a question from Esna wondering if there's a template for a release of information, and I'm going to go to, this is the contractor that I always like to go to. It's ESC 113. They have all of so there is not one for Dell that Dell has created. Wow, we got a lot of boxes open here. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to, hold on just a second. I can't see the menu. I can't see my menu choices here. Let me see. So I think you go to Programs and Services, and then you click on Head Start ECEAP. They've just redesigned it, so it can get hard. And then they have information about their policy council here. They have information for parents, and then you click on Head Start staff, and even though it says Head Start staff, it really is Head Start and ECAP staff. And they have all of their administrative forms, and so I know here, so they have admin forms, ed forms, family support forms, their food service and health forms that they've created, and they have it all online in an easy to access format. And so anytime I can, I encourage directors to go here. Look at what they have created, and I know they're going to have a release of information. They're going to have one on here, and so you could look at that, and then you could see, you know, what you could take from their release to develop your own. Okay, so that's ESP 113. I'll go back to the slideshow here. Make sure that we, oh, that's great. Okay, so it looks like that's the only question. Okay. Alrighty, so moving on to, I don't know why. All right, so financial disclosure forms. The financial disclosure form is due in June, May? June 15th. June 15th. It's one of the deliverables. You'll find it on your deliverable calendar. And in a moment, I'm going to ask the two directors that we have on the phone to share any pieces of advice they have around completing the financial disclosure form. And then I'm going to share some of the most common errors that come into the office when ECAP contractors complete the form. So, Connie, how about we have you share first about the ECAP financial disclosure form, and then Carrie will have you share.
This form is one that our fiscal department fills out for us. Anything to do with financial disclosure has to go through our agent. We're a CAP agency, has to go through our fiscal officer. So she is the one that takes the responsibility for this form.
So you have a financial officer who completes the form.
Yes.
That's your advice to the new contractors and directors is to
you know, every agency is set up differently, of course. Ours, our fiscal department and our fiscal officer is responsible for the entire agency, regardless of whether it's Head Start, ECAP, housing, any of those. And so it is policy that, and she, you know, does all of our, I do the budget, but she does all the final budget with us, and we have to have her blessing for anything that has to do with fiscal or financial responsibilities. And so she does this disclosure certification. Okay.
So I was sort of joking when I said what I said earlier about that, because I think every director wishes they could have a financial officer who completed this form.
Yeah,
right?
That's
really
true.
Give people a peace of mind, you know, when they have someone with, you know, a fiscal background completing this form. Fenya has just pulled the form up on the screen for us so that you can all see. I mean, I'm joking about it. I know that this form can cause a little bit of stress for contractors sometimes or directors, and it really is pretty straightforward. And and at any time you would have a question on what you're supposed to answer on this, we would of course ask you to contact the pre-K specialist that works with you, and they can help you sort through what you need to any information that you would need to be able to answer it confidently.
Right.
Okay,
but Connie. You know, I totally understand what the form is about. We do it together basically, but as far as responsibility, it does go to her.
So the financial disclosure form, we already had Connie talk about what she uses with the financial disclosure form. Terry, did you share what you do with the financial disclosure form?
I did with Connie, but I can share. Okay, I do the same thing. I complete as much of it as I can, and my secretary eyeballs it because she does a lot of the ordering and things and putting in the requisitions, and then I send it over to our financial office, and they finalize and sign off on it.
And that's your financial office with the school district, so they take a look at it before you send it off. Okay.
And they sign off on it because they are the ones that track all fiscal.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing what you do. So I'm sorry for those who could hear me the whole time. I'm going to repeat what I just said. So what I will say is that this is an important fiscal document. It's your certification that you followed all of the ECEAP financial requirements for the year. It's really the only fiscal document that we have you complete to make this statement, so we take it seriously. It's usually completed by an ECEAP director and a chief financial officer or someone who works in their fiscal department, if you have a fiscal department. It's important to read questions carefully and answer each question. I can tell you that one of the most common issues of why a pre-K specialist sends a form back to a director is because not all of the questions have been completed, so they've not answered yes, no, or not applicable. And I know that what happens is a director will go through and answer the ones they know right away, and then maybe they'll leave some out that they have a question about, and they'll get an answer to one of them, and then they'll send the form in forgetting that they still had a blank on another question. So please make sure that you complete all the questions. And then for questions 13 and 14, for this is your equipment disposal and your purchase for items that are 5,000 or greater. So in your contract, there's a requirement that you let us know prior to disposing of equipment and let us know prior to the purchase of items, the cost of a project that costs $5,000 or more, or an item that costs $5,000 or more. And what happens is when you send that in and we approve it, then we keep record of that, and when you turn in your financial disclosure form, we compare to make sure that all of those items have been appropriately identified. So you're going to want to make sure that you look at all of your purchase and disposals and make sure that they're listed. Svenja, can you go back up to number 7? So number 7 is tricky sometimes for some programs. They'll say, you know, they'll mark yes, and so what this means is that there's a prior approval piece that is in this prior approval for Dell. We obtained prior approval from Dell. So what I want to say is that prior approval for your federal match means that you completed, you complete this by entering information into ELMS. And it's really in September. Yeah, it happens in September. And so what ends up happening sometimes is that someone writes yes, they answer yes for number 7, but they've not entered in ELMS that, and they've not answered that federal match question. So you're going to want to make sure whoever is filling out this form has connected with the person who's responsible for answering that question in ELMS about federal match. Because if that doesn't match up, then we send it back to you and say, you've not said yes in ELMS, so we're confused now why you're saying yes on this form. All right, so are there any questions that anyone has about the federal match form? Again, it's pretty straightforward, and okay, so we do have a question. So, you know, Esna's asked a question, so if a CD player is old and not working, do we need approval to dispose of this form? And darn it, but I don't have my performance standards with me. So what I would say, Esna, is that's a really great question to ask the pre-K specialist that you work with. And then I would ask you to go to your contract, and actually we can pull it up right now on the website. So let me pull it up on the website really quickly, and then we'll see what the contract says, and we'll at the very bottom, and of course I've asked it. It's in the contract. Yes, it is. Okay. Had to make sure that my mind was having me go to the right place. Cancel. So in the contract, there is a, oh yeah, there we go, prior approval section. Purchasing equipment with unit costs of $5,000 or greater, including, so this is the selling or disposing of equipment purchased with ECEAP funds from the contractor's inventory list. So there's elsewhere in the contract, there's specific information about what you need to inventory. And so what I would have you do is go to the contract and see what the requirements are around what needs to be inventoried in your program, and then still call your pre-K specialist and sort of have this conversation with them so that you can get really specific information for your program. So the requirement is that you get it from the inventory list requirements, which I don't remember off the top of my head right now. So, okay. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, and I think we're all thinking that it probably would not include a CD player, but you can again check that. That's information that's all outlined for you in the contract. Okay, Svenya's going to pull up the other questions now so that we can see. The form on the Dell website is dated for last year. Do we just change the date, or do we need to wait until the new form is updated on the website? Thanks. Hey, Amy Nelson, thanks for pointing that out, that we have last year's form. So we have been having some troubles with the website and some of the documents that we've been posting. Somehow when they're doing some background work on the website, and so sometimes we're losing some documents that we have already posted. I assume we've already posted this. It was. Okay, so I'm actually getting nods from the room that we actually did post the one for this year. So please wait until that one is up and available. And if you continue to run into issues and don't have it available when you want it, then just contact, you know what I'm going to say, the pre-K specialist that works with your program, and they can email it to you. Okay, so can I go to number 9 and explain more? Okay, let's see, number 9. For programs that offer Part Day ECEAP in a child care center and only receive ECEAP funding through their Dell contract, so if you offer Part Day ECEAP, this is just verification that you are not double billing for, so if you have a child who's in a full day setting, right, so they're getting child care all day long, 10 hours a day, there are some contractors that have a Part Day ECEAP offering from, say, 9 to 12 with the new 3-hour requirement. And what they're wanting to make sure is that you are not billing for those child care subsidy dollars during that 9 to 12 time frame. And so they're just wanting you to verify that you're not double billing for that time for the ECEAP services and the child care subsidy services. So it's 5,000. So Ginger Williams is asking, are you talking about approval for anything 5,000 and over, even if it is allocated out to different programs, so I assume different funding streams, and is not a total of 5,000 directly to ECAP? So Peggy, go ahead. Do you want to answer that?
So what it means is even if $1 of the total 5,000 or more was paid out of ECAP funds, you would need to have prior approval for that because the cost of the project would be that $5,000 or more.
Okay. Great. Thanks everyone for your questions and participation around the financial disclosure form. I'm going to move on because we have 5 minutes left and I want to be able to talk with you a little bit about self-assessment. So for self-assessment, self-assessment is due in June as well. Our hope is that you have already started self-assessment. Self-assessment is a lengthy, in-depth process, and really it's a chance for you to be able to look at your program services and reflect on the pieces where you really feel confident that you're meeting the ECAP performance standards and the places where you maybe need to do a little more planning and put a little more effort into to make sure that you're fully meeting the ECAP performance standards. And I'm going to turn it over right now to Connie and Terry. Terry, let's have you talk first and talk about what you do in your self-assessment process.
Our self-assessment process, which we're actually doing next Friday, we do a data carousel. So we have all staff present. We have policy council members. We have our school board liaison present. We have some of our community partners invited and present. And we use a data carousel model looking at all different component areas of our program. We look at our program goals from the previous year and look for strengths, but also look for areas of growth or areas that we have further questions to answer. And then we collect all of that at the end of the day, and then a few days after that, the coordinator staff and myself, we all get together and start disseminating all that data and making sense of it and coming up with what next year's program will look like. And then we take that back to staff and policy council and school board and go through that process of rewriting and looking at goals for the following year.
So then what I'm hearing you say is that you have a one-day event where you are pulling together all the data that you and your team have collected about your ECAP program over the course of the year, and then you're really disseminating that and breaking it down and going through and looking at each part of the self-assessment in that meeting.
Correct. And we actually use a couple of years worth of data just to make sure that we're not just looking at a blip. So we look at data over time. And we know we have parent questionnaires. All of our parents fill out a survey during winter conferences here at school. We have an electronic survey that they do. And so, yeah, we use all of that information. We use our ongoing monitoring information from throughout the year, and we just use all those different pieces.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Connie, how about you guys? What do you do with self-assessment?
We do something very similar to that. We don't do what call a data carousel, but we do have policy council members, community members, and board members meet. We go over the assessment. We actually assign people, or have people volunteer, I should say, to look at specific component areas and go out actually into the classrooms and look at health and safety and those sort of things, sort of a mini monitoring. And then we come back together and we go through all of the documentation. We too go through last year's, and we kind of combine ours with our Head Start self-assessment, because we're kind of doing, getting the teams together at one time so that we get better use of the volunteers. And then we come back, we work on areas of strength, and then we look at the areas that could use improvement. We look at the patterns from our ongoing monitoring assessment. We have what's called the center-based monitoring report that comes out every month. and we compare the data between those two to see if there's a trend, and then we work on our goals and objectives from that.
Okay.
And our training plan comes from there, and then we finalize the document.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much for sharing. So what I'm hearing from both of you is that you make sure that for your self-assessment you're using data that you have pulled from your program and your community, and that you are involving parents and community partners, and that you are really working together to complete the document, and that you ask for volunteers, you're making sure you have policy council representation as well when you are looking at your information to complete your self-assessment. So I will say different programs do this differently. We just happen to have 2 contractors on the phone who do it similarly. For a smaller program, it would be much harder to pull this off because it would just be one person who would potentially be pulling all that data together. It still is possible. There have been the kinds of things in smaller programs. The person who was the primary for the self-assessment, they just looked at one part of the self-assessment each month. They broke it down monthly, and so they looked at Section A one month, and they looked at the questions that were asked in the self-assessment document. Fenia, could you please pull that document up on the website, and then we can kind of look at that, and then they would meet with their supervisor, and they would talk about where they think they're meeting and where they're not meeting, and then they would just break it down monthly so that they didn't have this really large document to complete at the end of the year. And for programs that have a smaller number of staff, this is a way that potentially keeps it a little bit more manageable than having it be just a one-day big event at the end of the year. So you can see this is the self-assessment for 2015-16. Glad to see the correct date up there. And it goes through, and it has fields for you to complete. We've made it be easy for you to be able to have this not be too time-consuming. Obviously, it lists who participates in your self-assessment. We really like to see parents' names on there and community partners as well. We also like to see staff, program staff listed there as well, so that we can see the different roles that participated in this evaluation of your program. The other thing that I'll say that we really like to see is we like to be able to see your not everything being fully met, because we know that that's really not possible, and so we like to really be able to see that you're using this document intentionally and purposefully, and that it's really identifying the areas for you, sort of the next steps you want to focus on, what your planning and ideas are to help strengthen something in your program. And so if you end up, identifying that you have, an action area, it's really helpful if you put in, if you're really specific about why you think it's an action area, and then what the steps are, the planning that you have in place to be able to address this action area. So just so you know, we use the self-assessment information at the Department of Early Learning to inform how the specialists provide their TA, their training and technical assistance support to you that they provide throughout the year, so that we can help you with the growth of your program. And then we also use it to look at trends statewide to sort of guide our statewide technical assistance efforts as well. So you can see it's really easy to find on the website. It has, it's very straightforward. It matches the performance standards and is hopefully easy to use. Looks like we have one question. So it's from Amy Nelson from South Bend, and Amy's asking a question really for Carrie and I think Connie around what types of specific data do you find most helpful? Carrie, Connie, someone?
Yeah, for me, it is the we use your ongoing monitoring program, I think, is critical, because when I send people out to the site, I need to know, when they come back with their reports, that we have something, a baseline to build on. And if we, because the center-based monitoring report is all done by staff. When I send out the team they go out with a staff person, but there's always either a parent or a community member, somebody else that's out there. And it's very important that when they come back with their reports that we compare to see if they're seeing the same thing or not seeing the same thing. So I really look at that as being my baseline for the information that I get back from the field. We take about a week to do our monitoring report. I mean, excuse me, our self-assessment.
Right. So, and so what you're saying is that you send out staff and parent volunteers or community reps to go out to sites to complete some of the checklists that are required as part of the self-assessment, and then you make sure that you use that site report data that they've collected as a way to inform your overall self-assessment.
That's right, especially when it comes to the health and safety part of it.
Okay.
I really like to have, because the staff tends to look at things one way, and then when you get someone out there with fresh eyes or unprejudiced opinions or whatever, you have at least a baseline, and then you can really see where your issues might be, especially if they see the same thing.
Right. So somebody who's not connected to the site, and then what they see when they are out there. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Connie. Do you have anything to add, Carrie, around the most helpful data?
We use Child Plus to track all of our majority of our program stuff, and so we use a lot of Child Plus reports. Again, that ongoing monitoring. We are a smaller program, so we are, just 2 sites. So then my coordinators being able to, they prepare and bring the data for all their sites, but we look at it previously as a coordinator staff to make sure, are we looking at the right things we need to be looking at. But we run health reports, we run attendance reports, home visit reports, family outcomes. So we really try to look at everything, as well as our Teaching Strategies Gold data reports there. And we also look at our kids. We now, in the K-12 system, have data of looking at our Head Start ECEAP children clear up through 3rd grade. So we pull that data and look at how they're doing compared to other free lunch kids in their grades.
Okay. Wow. So you're kind of doing your own little version of your extended saturation study kind of a thing, right? Like you're looking at that same group of eligible children and then seeing how they're doing. That's pretty cool. Yep. All right, so there are a variety of ways to complete your self-assessment, and you just really want to look at it thoughtfully, break it down into manageable steps for yourself so that you're not overwhelmed at the end of the year, and really touch base with your pre-K specialist about it around any suggestions or ideas they have in helping you keep it manageable for this year. I will add that besides the monitoring checklist that would happen directly as a result of self-assessment, that would have, like Connie's example of having staff who are not connected to that site in any way and getting that unbiased information and feedback from them, you would also want to use any kind of monitoring that you have completed throughout the year, you or your staff have completed throughout the year. So any classroom observations that were completed to be able to show that you're meeting the requirement for ongoing monitoring in the Section A of the performance standards, you would use any of that kind of information to inform your self-assessment as well. You would also want to be
I was just going to interrupt and just say, this is Connie, that what we do on our monthly ongoing monitoring is that we use the performance standards as benchmark. So we have a benchmark list for each component area so that when staff goes out, they have the performance standard benchmark that they use as their tool to observe. And then when you're getting your team together for the self-assessment, I think it's really important that you give them a good orientation on those benchmarks and on the self-assessment itself, so they have a really good understanding of what they're looking for and what they're looking at. But I think you have to have some sort of a tool, as I say, a benchmark list or something, to make it viable.
Yeah. Hey, Connie, would you be willing to send that in and share it so that we could share it with this group?
Sure.
Okay, that's great.
Happy to. I can.
So it's really great to see what other programs are doing and what they have created in order to be able to have folks not reinvent the wheel and duplicate effort, and to be able to just have programs, new directors feel supported as well. So I appreciate that, Connie. The other thing that I'll just say is you're going to want to be looking at your ELMS data reports. That has lots of really good information for you in there. If you use another database system like Carrie does, she's saying they use Child Plus, then of course you'd want to use data from that database system as well. And she's right, it's really important to remember all those great reports in TS Gold as well. And then if you're lucky enough to have had a monitoring visit from the Department of Early Learning, you can always also use the information and feedback we give you from a site visit or a monitoring visit that may have occurred. So I think that's everything that I have for self-assessment. Really appreciate everyone's participation. I know we've gone over a little bit today. I think due to technical difficulties, I appreciate everyone's patience with that as well. And if you have any questions about this presentation, or if you want any of the handouts or anything that was discussed on this webinar, then you would contact, can you go to the next slide, Sonia? You can contact myself, next slide, or Peggy Brown. And our information is right there. Okay, thanks everyone. Have a fantastic rest of the year. This is actually the last new director webinar that we're going to be having for the year. And your feedback would be really valuable for us to know whether or not we should do this again next year for new people coming on, the kinds of topics and information you found most helpful. We have heard unanimously from those who've given us feedback that what they really appreciate the most is hearing from the seasoned, experienced directors. And so we would, of course, continue to have that component as well, because we know that that's where our richest resource is. So please share feedback.
I'd like to offer an invitation to anybody that can come and visit the program, too.
Oh, Connie, how thoughtful and generous of you. So, Connie, do you want to tell people where your program is so that they know, just how much travel they would have to do to come visit your program, or not?
Right. Right. Well, we're in Bremerton, which is a ferry ride from Seattle. We're on the Olympic Peninsula. We're about an hour north of Olympia. Depending on how you drive, I suppose, an hour and 15 minutes north of Olympia. So,
and that would maybe depend on traffic too, right?
Yeah, it depends on traffic, absolutely, 45 minutes from Tacoma. But we're, a 30-minute ferry ride if you go to Bainbridge, through Bainbridge. But we're pretty easy to get to. We're very close to the freeway, so anytime, we're at 1201 Park, so anybody can, we're on the roster that you sent out on, and so just email me or whatever, and we can set up a time for somebody to come and visit and just see what we do and see if it's going to be helpful.
Oh, thank you, Connie. I really appreciate that.
Same with Walla Walla, you got to go clear to the other side of the state.
Yeah.
Right on, Sherry.
No ferry.
Great. No ferry.
Right.
That's right. No ferry. Just
yeah, you can drive around. You don't have to take a ferry, but you can drive around. But anyway, The invitation's
Connie.
there. Sure.
Thanks, Connie. So, Carrie,
You bet.
then for you, they would just have to take a drive to sunny Walla Walla, right?
Exactly.
That's right. So thanks for the invitation. And here's what I'll say. We have two very generous directors on the phone right now extending the invitation. And I know that most ECAP directors, if they could be on the call, would extend the same invitation as well. So if you have interest in visiting a neighboring program, here we go. You know, I'm going to say it. Contact the pre-K specialist that works with you, and they can help set that kind of a visit up for you. And it is a great way to learn. It's a great way to make a connection with another director, and I really encourage it. All right, have a great rest of the year, everyone. Thanks so much for your participation in these calls throughout the year. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.